Welcome children, take out your Radiant Reader book, chapter 20, A Strange Battle part 2. Before explaining this chapter, let me recap the part 1. In part 1, we have seen that Don Quixote, a Spanish gentleman, wanted to be a knight and do some noble deed. Instead did some silly things. One day, Don Quixote, along with his squire, Sancho Punjab, set out through the countryside to perform noble deeds. On his way, he saw a cloud of dust. Thinking it to be two great armies on the battlefield, he thought of performing some gallant deeds. Now, let me start explaining part 2 in gist. From the hillock, the two forks of ship were hidden by the cloud of dust, so the sight couldn't be seen. But Don Quixote, in his fancy, saw two great armies and began to describe all the warriors to Sancho. Sancho Panza stood speechless, only waving from side to side. If he could see anything, what his master spoke. At last he said he couldn't see anything, only he could hear the bleating of sheep and lambs. As Sancho couldn't see or hear anything, so Don Quixote left him stand aside and went alone to fight the battle and be victorious. He darted down the hillock like lightning. Sancho called out his master to return back, as there were only sheep and lambs. Without looking behind, Don Quixote ran into the midst of the ship and began to attack them boldly, as if he was really fighting with his greatest enemies. The shepherds with their flock of sheep and lambs tried to stop, but he didn't pay any heed, so they pulled out their slings and shot a large stone at him. Still he didn't pay any heed, instead ran here and there. At last a great stone struck his arm, then another struck his face that knocked down some of his teeth, and he fell from his horse to the ground. Thinking him to be dead, the shepherds ran away with their flocks. Sancho, who stood upon the hillock and was watching everything, began to think if he had never met the foolish Don. Then at last he ran to him. Don Quixote was hurt, but he didn't lose his senses. So when Sancho told him that he had already warned that they were just flock of sheep and not army of men, however, Don Quixote replied that it was the work of his enemy, who was also an enchanter. When his enemy found that he was about to lose the battle, he changed his two armies into flock of sheep. Though Sancho didn't believe such a story, then Don Quixote arose tenderly, nursed his hurt face, then slowly mounted on his horse and followed his squire from the strange battle. And now let me give you the question answers of this chapter. Question 1. Why were the flocks of sheep not to be clearly seen from the hillock? Answer. The flocks of sheep were covered with great clouds of thick dust, so they were not clearly seen from the hillock. Question 2. What did Don Quixote imagine the flocks of sheep to be? Answer. Don Quixote imagined the flocks of sheep to be a great army of many nations who were on the march that way. Question 3. How did Sancho Panza behave while Don Quixote described all the fanciful knights and giants? Answer. When Don Quixote described all the fanciful knights and giants, Sancho Panza stood speechless, looked here and there to see anything. What his master spoke. At last he said he couldn't see anything, only he could hear the bleating of lambs. Question 4. How did Don Quixote try to help the army of King Pentapolis? Answer. To help the army of King Pentapolis, Don Quixote set his lance, drove his spurs into his old horse's sides and darted down the hillock like lightning. Question 5. What did the shepherds do to stop Don Quixote from hurting the sheep? Answer. To stop Don Quixote from hurting the sheep, the shepherds pulled out their slings and shot a volley of large stones at him. Question 6. What was the result of Don Quixote's battle? Answer. Don Quixote's battle ended in a failure. The shepherds hurt him and made him fall from his horse to the ground. They, thinking him to be dead, the shepherds fled away. Still, Don Quixote believed in his imaginary story of battlefield. Question 7. What was the result of the attack on the ship? Answer. The attack on the ship made the shepherd furious. They hit Don Quixote with stones and made him fall from his horse to the ground, while his squire Sancho wished if he could never had met the foolish Don. Question 8. How did Senko behave during this attack? Answer. During this attack, Senko cried aloud to stop his master, as they were nothing but only lambs and sheep. At last, when he saw his master's fall, he cried out, tearing his hair, wishing if he had never met the foolish Don. Question 9. What, according to Don Quixote, had been done to the armies? Answer. According to Don Quixote, the armies were turned into flocks of sheep, as his enemy was also an enchanter. And with this, I am ending my today's class. Goodbye.